more to come as Israelis reel from these deadly payback attacks on innocent civilians. Here to break down the terror regime's plan to reshape the Middle East and world as we know it from the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Behnam Taleblu. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben. I know that you have a lot of insight on this, but what's your top line reaction to the exchange so far?
Well, great to be with you. This is nothing short of historic. When the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism, with the biggest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, feels empowered or comfortable to be lobbying these things at civilian population centers like you've been seeing all last night, alarm bells should be going off in Washington. This is not something I think that the U.S. can remain neutral about, and particularly because the U.S. has thus far helped to do some of the interceptions of these missiles, but some missiles have landed, some civilians have died, and I think right now there's no way out but through, and it is going to be getting worse.
You know, you say it's not something the U.S. should remain neutral. I don't know that we are neutral, but are you saying that the U.S. should play a larger role in the offensive action?
I think the Iranians should know the more they escalate this, the costlier it's going to be for them, rather than they think the better it's going to be for them. Right now, because it is reported that we are helping doing some of the missile interceptions, the Iranians are threatening to widen the war, potentially to go after U.S. bases or embassies in the region. And the tip-off for that was the story from last week that the U.S. was drawing down some of the non-essential personnel in places like Iraq and Kuwait where we have bases.
Yeah, I hate to war game you here, but I mean, you brought this up, and it really is important. And I think it's what the majority of Americans are thinking about. Iran says, hey, U.S. military bases are on our target list. If we play that scenario where Iran strikes a U.S. military base, intentionally kills U.S. military personnel, I don't think there's a world where we don't respond. And at that point, where are we? Is the United States at war with Iran?
Well, hopefully there's enough communication that the regime knows that this is too dangerous to even begin with. I mean, that seems like that's Mr. Trump's art of the deal to begin with. They know that if you cross this line, you will be killed. And I think the Islamic Republic knows that, you know, President Trump is the one who was willing to pull the trigger against the regime's chief terrorist, Qasem Soleimani, when two previous administrations were not. So I think that is also weighing on the regime, how best to respond without losing their head.
There's a lot of conversation about what capabilities Iran still has. Have they been severely damaged? Have some of their air assets or most of their air assets been taken away? And then there's a conversation of where were they with their nuclear program and how much of it did Israel get? I'd love your insight on that.
Well, how much of the nuclear program did Israel get is really the million-dollar intelligence question right now. There's at least 4 facilities that we know were hit. Some of them seem very significantly damaged. We don't know how much access Iran has to that fissile material, to that nuclear material in some of those facilities. But I bet you if you're a regime like the Islamic Republic, you're trying to find a way to squirrel in, to move some of that uranium out to a potential hidden facility and to make sure that if strikes continue, that they will be able to retain their nuclear program. I mean, this is the stuff that is always experienced in war games. But when you look at the strikes Israel has successfully been able to land so far, I call it a defanging operation. You know, they're not just striking nuclear sites, they're trying to prohibit the regime from being able to have the capability to carry out this missile war.
You know, it's scary times. I think we have the right people in charge of our government and military, and I hope that we find a resolution here that doesn't cost more lives. Behnam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. More. Here we go. Straight ahead. The Huckle